Chapter 5, Albert's Journal of the Universe. Fifth entry. Sound vibrations. September 2nd, 2045. Continued.
When we looked at the recordings of the lab after our shared dream vacation, we saw that many of the beings we came connected to within the dreamscape had returned with us as photons. The dreamscape would always be there for us to visit, or we could simply create another. I am getting ahead of myself as I write this journal, although there is a purpose for bringing up the lab's camera recordings before we proceed with the journal. For now, let's back up to where we left off by talking about Brandon's experience within his dream visions. After our rest, we all gathered once again to journey together. Brandon's ability to communicate with all species, beings, life, nature, and all vibrational language has helped us in all the journeys that we have been experiencing. Brandon's personal challenge was to find a dialect he could not understand or comprehend. This quest would lead us to a dark realm that Brandon, Charles, and Penny had yet to experience in their current incarnation as our children. The levels of communications within our group had no barriers. We knew about Brandon's challenging quest without any spoken words. We were all playfully acceptant to accompany Brandon. Our children were star beings that had been experiencing Source Spirit for thousands of reincarnations. So our new journey takes us back to Brandon as he was in another life cycle. In this incarnation, Brandon was a lawyer for the Crown during the Inquisition. We immediately felt a strong disconnection with anything other than the physical reality that his previous lifetime was living through. An air of arrogance permeated the energy field that this being portrayed. Brandon could hardly believe that he perceived existence in this limited egotistical manner at any time within his journey into our shared reality, even in a previous life. We observed his past incarnation with the same interest Brandon had. We reminded Brandon to observe without judgment. His quest had led us here, and we were determined to find the incomprehension language. Why were we here? Brandon was the most perplexed with this question. This was a vision based on his previous life, and his memories of being here were as fresh as if he was reliving it all over. He knew that language was subject to individual interpretation and learned definitions, and in this previous life he had used that knowledge to change the meanings of words to benefit himself as an imagined superior being. Even the remembered experience of love in this incarnation brought uneasy feelings of regret, yet Brandon remained non-judgmental and detached. It seems that Brandon's mastery of language came with some hard lessons that would eventually develop into this divine spirit we call Brandon. Sir James Beth Aragon was his old incarnation. Lord Aragon was very influential with the kings that were making claims of dominion, churches that had agendas, and the pawns that served the self-created leaders. He played a deadly game of deceit in the chessboard reality he believed himself to be in, programming the populace into accepting his shared perceptions of status conflicts. Getting others to accept his delusions of authority was achieved by his fluent rhetoric. He smiled quietly to himself as others assimilated their energy towards his barbaric paradigm. He was quick to shun or persecute those who saw reality differently. Lord Aragon's language was being guided by a limited selfish intent, along with a narrow perspective. For Lord Aragon, words were like daggers of persuasion, yet as intelligent as he believed himself to be, he failed to reach beyond the physical realm. He saw the value in how the churches controlled the beliefs of the masses by only sharing half-truth mixed in with illusion. He kept the knowledge of everyone's divine connection with Source a secret from others, as if he was the only one who knew. Lord Aragon lived in London, where the Christian church was accepted by most of the populace. Those who held on to ancient wisdom were prosecuted for their beliefs or wisdom. Many of the great minds of his time were burned as witches or demons after a mockery of a trial. Lord Aragon was responsible for many of these death sentences. He knew that critical thinking was more dangerous than whole armies, so opposing perspectives to him or the church had to be silenced quickly. One of his opposing forces was the maiden Osiris, who was full of love. The maiden Osiris shared healing freely. She had ancient knowledge taught to her by her grandfather, who was a druid sorcerer. Her natural way of bringing joy to those around her made her an attraction amongst the people. The king at this time period was placing himself at the right hand of what he called God. This was placing himself above the church, who already had an illusionary claim to that position. People were being forced, coerced, bribed, or put to death for not complying with the king's fantasy. The maiden Osiris knew that nothing stood between us and our Creator, so she was risking her life for her knowingness. She also knew that anything that is forced on you against your will is not your will. When our team of dream journeyers came across Maiden Osiris, she was instantly recognized as a past reincarnation of Penny. All of the memories of this past life returned to Penny, as soon as she made contact with the maiden Osiris. We all felt her shock as she realized that her dear brother Brandon was once her nemesis. Maiden Osiris imparted what was widely regarded as common knowledge to her nearest kin and companions. Her insights cast everything into a harmonious light that resonated with the seekers of truth. Regrettably, her views clashed with the intentions of the king and Lord Aragon. Her candidness was endured until she echoed a biblical sentiment endorsed by the church, "I am the Lord thy God, thou shalt not have false gods before me." She argued that by positioning the king, or the church, between oneself and God, one violates the very first commandment. This commandment tells you that you are God. The key words, "I am." Each of us is God, along with everything we see, hear, smell, touch, or experience. By making this statement of truth, the maiden was marked by the monarch, leading to a search and capture order from the king. She could be put to death for not accepting the king's status. What the king failed to recognize was that all men and women are kings and queens. His status was the illusion that gave him authority over those that consented or validated his claim. The perils maiden Osiris was subjected to grew, as we all felt Penny's uneasiness remembering these events. She wanted to warn her previous self of the coming events, although there was a healing going on within her that she did not quite comprehend. We proceeded viewing the events that unfolded without judgment or attachment. Many versions of this same story have already occurred in many dimensions, so why should we create another? As fate would have it, the maiden Osiris was finally caught, then brought before Lord Aragon for trial and retribution. Lord Aragon immediately questioned the maiden by twisting her words. He asked her if she stood behind her claim to be God and greater than the king or church. The maiden replied by saying,
"I am neither above nor below anyone or anything. We are all part of prime creation. Does a bird claim to be a bird? Making claims on things is a learned behavior. If you claim you are something or own something, you are only creating an illusion."
Aragon snaps back.
"And yet you make statements attesting to your claims of grandeur. Many have heard your claims and hold witness to your treason to the church and crown. You will be held accountable for your outspoken acts against the state."
Osiris spoke with certainty.
My intent was to show others they held the source within, and they should not give that away. If my words hold truth, then that is for others to determine. You cannot extinguish or crush an idea. Thoughts exist for all to hear, even if they are not spoken in words. All one has to do is be willing to listen to their inner wisdom.
Aragon rationalized his thoughts before speaking again. He knew that what Osiris was saying was true truth, although it was not serving the agendas of the crown. This common-sense wisdom could spread like a dis-ease, foiling all the illusions that have been so carefully and methodically put in place. How would the sheep survive without control? They need us to lead them. They ask us to lead them. After a pause, Aragon sternly turns towards Osiris, saying,
"What you are saying will only cause anarchy, then chaos. The sheep will need guidance to build a society that will survive. They need protection from the terrible forces that can so easily subdue them into a fate far worse than what we offer."
Brandon was astonished at Aragon's psychotic rationale. Maybe this was the uncomprehensional language he was searching for. Here was a language of manipulation. If there is no demon to cause fear, then create one. We all continued observing without judgment. Osiris was not given the opportunity to reply as Aragon ushered for the guards to take her to the dungeons until the death ceremony. She is held for 2 years, so most would forget the words of truth that she voiced, and then she was reintroduced to the populace as the heretic traitor that was condemned for causing public unrest. Aragon fine-tuned his rhetoric by redefining common words used by the people. He gave new meaning to words, then taught these new meanings to those that held him as an authority. This would be a language that could condemn anyone that is not familiar with his interpretation. He called these hidden word meanings the language of law to give them illusionary substance. This was also a language of gestures or outburst of emotions such as indignity or righteousness. Slamming your fist on a table to create a diversion was one of these tactics. It is not always what is said, but what is allowed to be heard. Once one consented to play his game, they already lost the game. Aragon came to understand that gaining validation was more influential and lucrative than imparting genuine wisdom. If the majority accepts a falsehood as truth, then it becomes their reality. This became Aragon's clandestine philosophy, leading him to focus entirely on garnering support for his insidious objectives. Weave the truth in with the lie, so that it is harder to find and much more believable. Denounce, defeat, defraud, deceive, and devalue are weapons of subversion or aids in validation. All of these tactics were used before the final death ceremony for Osiris. On the day of final reckoning for Osiris, where she would return to Prime Creator with open arms, a new player came into the game. Aragon was at his best in manipulating the crowds, there to make witness for the event. Osiris was brought out before everyone in a state of weakness, malnutrition, and dehydration. She was tied to a cross to be burned. As Aragon announced the alleged crimes against the crown, church, state, and common welfare of the people, the court jester made a dynamic entrance with a handful of sparkling fireworks. Doing acrobatics while dancing and laughing, he quickly outshined Aragon and his boring rhetoric. The bells on the jester's head seemed to play a tune as he finally spoke.
What a wonderful occasion we are all attending. I expect to see smiles on every face, laughter coming from your spirits and love in your heart as we put to death this vile creature of divine origin. Come and laugh with me to celebrate the demise of a free-thinking being in a corporal vessel. How wonderful it is to deny something that is out of the ordinary. Believe what they tell you for it is what they want you to believe. After all, they are your protectors.
As he took out his play fishing pole to further play with the crowd, he could see armed guards quickly surrounding him. With a series of handsprings, he made his way to the cross of Osiris. The guards approached looking as menacing as could be. They meant business that was sure. Picking up a torch, then lighting it, he playfully smiled, saying,
Wait a minute, men. I am on your side. Here, I will set her on fire for you. You can watch while you are grateful that it is not your spouse or siblings getting burned to death. Smile, be happy. Don't be such grumpy people on this happy day.
Not quite sure what to do, the guards looked to Aragon for a sign. Aragon responded with a clenched fist, telling them to snatch the jester. The crowd was in chaos as this all took place, and many of the spectators stepped between the guards and the jester as he continued his playful rambling. In a loud, boisterous, comical voice, he approached Osiris with his lit torch, saying,
You have been a naughty girl, haven't you? You spoke about love and self-worth. Come on, admit it. You placed yourself alongside the crown and not beneath it. How dreadfully insane you must be. I will burn you for this treachery, you unholy demon spawn. Only our glorious protectors can determine what we think.
With that, he turns to the gathering, an even larger number of spectators than before. Most were confused, but there was an air of levity. Some confusion arose in the crowd. It was a mixture of anger, laughter, and self-realization, although most listened intently. The jester started out bowing to the crowd.
I would like a volunteer from the audience, someone that is capable of critical thinking. Come on. There must be some thoughtful people out there, you good sir. Did I see you raise your hand? Do you think you are capable of independent thought? Yes, guards? Grab him, we are all going to have a party today, a double burning. Can you feel the excitement building? Anyone else like to volunteer? Wait, I see that some of you would like to see me burned to death as well. That just might happen. Don't leave until the show is over. Wow, a triple burning. What a story to tell your friends and family. Ya Bubba. You should have been there. The guards grabbed this babbling jester with a funny hat and burned him as well. The screams were all different from each other. What a spectacle.
Charles was the first to notice. He turned to me and said,
That is me, Daddy. I remember this. This is not a happy ending.
We all felt Charles as he recalled the climax of this lifetime's drama. Charles turns to Brandon and speaks.
Next time, I want to play the bad guy. Do we have to watch this part? Osiris sounded like a golden siren. The volunteer was baritone, and I laughed to the end.
Brandon spoke up.
I do not want to see or experience this again. I had nightmares about this, and now I know the story behind those dreams. The people were shaking in their boots after that. It wasn't until I returned to Source that I realized my greedy purpose in that life.
Bill admitted.
I wasn't certain until now, but it turns out I was the volunteer during that era. I recall gazing upon thousands of individuals, each observing the unfolding events through their unique lens. The mixed emotions that swirled around as the jester entertained the crowd are still vivid in my memory. Laughter erupted when he commanded the guards to seize me. To my astonishment, they did, preparing to burn me alongside you. Charles, the impact of your actions as a court jester at that assembly resonated deeply, affirming that an idea cannot be extinguished.
The language of deceit with the intent of greedy manipulation is a language I once spoke but could no longer comprehend. We get our answers in ways we least expect sometimes.
That finished another day of our shared dream vacation, so I will be wrapping up on this journal entry. This was an enlightening day full of surprises. We all share these life journeys, and it is sometimes a small universe where we keep bumping into each other to help us along or pull us back. Sometimes we learn from our mistakes but forget how the lesson was learned. Brandon glimpsed his dark side in a previous life, and it was a remembering that he needed to experience again. I am sure we all face that challenge when it presents itself to us.
I trust you found enjoyment in this excerpt from Albert's Dream Journal. Return for more as we explore realities inaccessible in our waking world. Please like and subscribe to this channel for new chapters of this dream journal.